All right,
Well,
couple of quick questions.
yeah.
What is your day like now? How long have you been retired?
I've been retired, Earl, since 2001, which would equate to 19 years.
Wow.
About 10 years older than you are.
Yeah, you're pretty old, man. You like ancient, like a. Now, is it true that because when you came to Chicago, I kicked ass at the gym, you retired?
Listen, don't even twist that story, and you better tell it right, because you were ill. You actually looked like you could have used the EMS when I left that place. I didn't come in there to participate. I came to dominate, and you recognized at that time, at the end of my career, you recognized
1999.
Well, shit, that was the end of my career. I only had a couple more in me, but I came in there and destroyed everything that moved. What was it, Quads Gym?
Yeah, Quads Gym, yeah.
You got a newfound respect for what it was like to be called a professional bodybuilder. Because
I learned a lot that day. I learned a lot that day. I said I learned a lot that day.
And so did your boy Sylvester Solomon, man. That fool, I think he quit bodybuilding after that. I drug him in the deep end and drowned him. That was a good time, dog. That was a good time.
All right, second question. What year do you think was your best look?
I mean, I was very comfortable in '99. Trust me, that Olympia was probably historically one of the better Olympias when you look at that top 6 lineup, which was inclusive of Flex Wheeler, Kevin Levrone, Chris Cormier, Nasser El Sonbati, Ronnie Coleman, and myself. I felt like that contest prep and that look for me was comfortable. People want to talk about the 94 and the 96. Those were the 2 years that the judges acknowledged I was in the fight for the title. But in terms of comfortability, I thought 92 was a very good year for me because I came back and did some crazy things to my physique from 91 to 92. I should say from 1990 to 92. Mm-hmm. There were some dramatic changes in my conditioning, detail from being able to bring in my lower back, being able to really dial in my back double bicep pose. I thought, I was a little slighted with Lee Labrada beating me in that contest. But I was comfortable with that look in 92 and in 99 but arguably 93, I felt like I really arrived on the scene, and that was a tough one with Dorian winning his third Olympia or second Olympia, and Flex Wheeler coming off of the Arnold Classic victory. I thought a little subpar, especially from the back, his hamstrings and glutes were really watery. So, I mean, 92, 93, 94, 96. I mean, I don't have a year. I felt good in all those years.
I know in 94 you took second, right? And then what other year you took second?
96.
I know 94 you took second.
Yeah, 94 and 96, but I don't validate my career look as those being the best just simply because the judges said they were. I felt really on the money in 99, which was close to the end.
Okay.
And again, in 92, I was really happy with that look because of the jump I made from 1990 drug-free Olympia and the 91 Olympia, that I was a little bit more watery because I was coming off the Arnold Classic victory and some guest posing appearances, and I just didn't have the time to do it right for 91. So 92, I felt like, boom, I made a huge jump. In 93, I served notice. In 94, the judges kind of recognized what I was doing with my body. But if I had to choose a year that I mentally, physically really enjoyed, was 99. None of the years for me were a struggle. I never struggled. Like Ronnie Coleman almost died in 2001. Flex Wheeler was in the hospital after the majority of his Olympia competitions. I had one cramp in my hamstring in 92. And mind you, I was really dehydrated in 92. And I think I might have over-dehydrated a little bit, flattened me out. I didn't have a chance to fill myself up. But I never felt near death.
What do you think the key to that was? I mean, is it
moderation? No, moderation.
Okay.
These guys were doing so much crazy shit on the last minute to look a certain way for one moment in time that it was so dramatic to their system that they would feel a certain way, whether it was the diuretics, or whether it was the insulin, or the growth hormone, or just pulling water. You can go back through my career, and you can see through those Battle of Olympias with Mitsuru that I did. I was ready weeks out from the show. I made sure that I was ready, because I also knew the value and the importance of good photography. And Joe Weider, luckily with proximity to me, made sure to remind me to be in shape so we can get some pictures before, during, and obviously after. So I was one of the most photographed bodybuilders of my generation, and I had some very good wisdom being bestowed upon me from Joe. So I made sure, like, you show up at my gym 2 weeks out from the Olympia, I'm ready to, so many guys cancel photo shoots, and they would call me and say, Shawn, can you fill in for Flex? Can you fill in for Matarazzo? Can you fill in for Dillette? And I was like jumping at Chomp. I actually trained harder when I knew the camera was on me, where some of these guys were so depleted or so tired from their training that it's like it was something they didn't want to do. And I was like, this is what I always envisioned professional bodybuilding to be like training and being photographed, training and being videotaped. I mean, why not do it at your best? Like, yeah, I was dehydrated, and yeah, I was on my way down, but I knew and looked and felt I was at my best 2 weeks, 1 week, 2 weeks after, before, during, and after the Olympia. So I prepared for that shit.
At what age did you feel you knew you wanted to do this for a living, what you do? Because you're still doing it at a very high level. You're doing it in a different way, but it's still the business of bodybuilding. At what age did you decide that this is what I want to do for the rest of my life?
I was literally 17 years old in high school, coming off of an injury my senior year in football. And after I hit my first show, mind you, I'd never seen a show before I was actually in the show. I hit my first show, excuse me, I got second place. A week later, I won, and I was hooked. I was hooked because I was introduced to bodybuilding by a professional, John Brown, and I saw the fruit of his labor, the trophies, the magazines, sitting there listening and watching his actions as a pro. He was eat, sleeping, and training, and he trained twice a day. His job was his body. He was an artist. He was an art. He graduated from Cal State Fullerton in art as an art major. He had a clothing company. But picture me as a teenager walking in and out of his condo and seeing those constant reminders of his trophies throughout the years. I caught him at the tail end of his career, but I saw those trophies. They stood out like amazing. If we were a football player, it'd be like sitting in a room full of Super Bowl titles. And then I would hear him conduct business on the phone in German. He would be, filling up his passport, going to Germany and going over to England and Holland. I mean, places I'd only heard of in school. Like, I didn't know anybody that traveled that way. This is in like 83. And then, he'd have me pick him up at the airport, and he'd come home with all this money. It'd be a bag full of money. I mean, $1,000 to a teenager looks like $1 million.
Right.
But I said, what are you doing? Like, I'm posing, I'm doing seminars, I'm doing workshops. And, he wasn't competing for prize money doing the Universe and the Mr. World Championship. So he was marketing himself, and I had great exposure to be a fly on the wall for the tail end of that journey for him. And I thought, mind you, he's 6'2", he's 250, 60 pounds. It wasn't something that you could just copy and emulate. But as I became a student of the game, I went back and I was studying Flex magazine. I see that Franco Columbu was like 5'4". Chris Dickerson's like 5'6". Samir Banu in 1983 is 5'7". Muhammad McAway was 5'5". I mean, I saw guys like myself. And although they were superhuman and a million miles from my economy, I thought, well, if they can do it, maybe I have a chance. And I was doing the things necessary to look that way because I was training with a professional.
Right.
And mind you, I was copying him. I brought nothing original to the table. I was a punching bag. I was like a pace car on a racetrack with John Brown. He beat the shit out of me.
Did you?
Hey, Shawn. I don't want to cut you off. Hey, how are you?
I'm good. Hey, TA.
Did you feel from the business standpoint of learning it at an early age that you could take it to a different level, or you wanted to strictly emulate what he was doing, because the times were changing. Just like now with the use of the internet, the times have changed. I know a lot. The reason that I asked that is that I know a lot of things, what I do with business, with Chie or for myself, anything like that, I got from hanging with you. I remember being at the Arnold Classic and working the booth with you. And at that time, guys, they would have one table, you'd have four. They'd have some pictures, you'd have pictures, calendar, bobblehead dials, books, posters, scarves. So it was kind of like you brought in, you were the first person that I saw at 19, 20 years old, driving a drop Rolls Royce, making a VHS tape, building a house. You know what I mean? So that was like, that was where I got, you know, to me, when I saw that, and this was before I even met you, it was like, wow, you know what I mean? There's a whole nother side to this. Did you see that at that time, that it was a whole nother side to the business that you could take advantage of? Or was it strictly about becoming the best Mr. Olympia?
Well, no, I didn't see that, because the majority of the bodybuilders were living, you know, hand to mouth. I never left home. I trained at Gold's Gym, and my first apartment was maybe 20 minutes from my home, but my friends were the people, even today, were the people I was growing up around. And I could see, I had friends that went into construction. I had friends that were very successful doing other things, but I knew that in running back and forth to Woodland Hills and the Joe Weider headquarters and having conversations with people that were successful and being the kind of guy that, like, I wanted to be around people smarter than myself, I was more motivated by the fear factor of this not working out. I knew that if they're buying pictures because they like my look, why not a t-shirt? If they're buying a t-shirt, why not a poster? If they're buying a poster, why not make a video? And so I found these different little revenue streams that, you know, back then you had to literally write. I had a P.O. box when I was 19 years old because this was how people would contact me. I was in Flex magazine, wanted to make sure that they can reach me. But in doing so, I also was signing pictures and finding the places to get those pictures up in the supplement stores and on all the gyms. So I would go on the back of the pages of Muscle and Fitness, Flex, Iron Man magazine, Muscle Mag International, and I would find the addresses, because they always had like the addresses of the stores and the gyms and the shops. And I would print out my pictures, personalize them to that store, that shop, that gym, and I'd stick them in an 8x10 envelope, and I'd send them out all over the world, not just to California, but all over the world. So I got my pictures up in places I'd never even visited. And this created some sort of recognition for myself. And then as I grew as a bodybuilder and started to validate my existence by winning the Mr. California, the national championships, becoming a pro bodybuilder, competing and standing in the Mr. Olympia, and then doing these photo shoots that were in magazines at the time I didn't know were global. Like if I did a photo shoot in my gym, these pictures would wind up in freaking Russia. They would wind up in Mexico, Canada, Spain, Germany, all these places that weren't even on my radar. And then suddenly people would contact me, and it's all snail mail. There's no email, there's no text message, they're not calling me. They would write me and ask me what my fee was for a guest appearance, a seminar, a workout. And I found a way to tap into that really early and started copying what John Brown was doing in Europe. I was doing all over the world. So because I had this NPC title of national champion, and mind you, I was the fifth, historically, I was the fifth national champion ever. You had Lee Haney win the very first one in 1982. 1983 was Bob Paris. 1984 was Mike Christian. 1985 was Phil Williams. 1986 was Gary Stridham. In 1987, there was Shawn Ray. I was in a very elite group of people. All of those guys that preceded me were well-known, marketable people. And maybe the lesser known was Phil Williams because he had a very short run as a pro in 1985. But Gary Stridham, Mike Christian, Bob Paris, Lee Haney, the world knew who they were. And then there I was in 1987 winning the Nationals at 21, 22 years old. So it opened a lot of doors, Earl, and I knew that trying to get one paycheck from competing once a year was not going to sustain a livelihood for me. And so by the time I won the national championships, I was all about the business of bodybuilding. I was all about Shawn Productions, and I knew if I was on the production end of things, I would have longevity. So that led to creating muscle camps. It led to me creating contests. It led to me knocking off 6 or 7 videos, CDs, DVDs in my career on the production and contest productions, getting on the Flex Magazine workout show, appearing on the Dating Game. I was on the Dating Game way back in like '89.
I saw you.
Yeah.
Phil Donahue.
The Phil Donahue show. I mean, I was all about getting this exposure that I had to create for myself in order to give me that celebrity status. But in the meantime, all of that would have meant nothing if I wasn't producing on the stage, which is why when it came to time to prepare for the Olympia, I was all about it. But remember, I knew that I had a mortgage, I had a car payment, I had a dog. And I knew that one income source was not going to be able to sustain me if I got injured. And at the peak of my career, I had 9 companies that I was representing. And those 9 checks, those nickels and dimes add up to dollar and cents. Legitimized my profession. It legitimized my choice of profession. And clearly my mom and my dad were proud that I wasn't nickel and diming them anymore. And they saw that I could string a few things together. And then on top of that, I had my video sales, my poster sales, my picture sales, my seminar speaking engagements, my guest posing appearances. And then I had all these companies I represented, from Max Muscle to Saranac Gloves to Weider Supplements, Powerhouse Gym International, Pro Fitness USA, Ruthless Wear. I mean, I was all over the place with all kinds of companies. And that was something I learned along the way. It wasn't something that was taught.
And you're still doing that to this day. Like, I watched the interview and we kind of know who it is, but it was stated like, okay, well, you didn't compete a lot because you said you were trying to win Olympia. Well, I followed your whole career, and it was more so like you've invented things like you MC for a living, you traveled the world, you created. To me, and this is just my personal opinion, there would be no 5'7", 5'8" Mr. Olympia bodybuilders if it wasn't for what you did, because at the time you were competing, the only guy that was your height placing in the top 5 were you, because they just had this certain look that they wanted, but your look they couldn't deny. And it opened up the door when you start talking about the 202s, the 212s. It opened the door for a lot of other things that at the time, and even to this day, Shawn, selfish Shawn, all about Shawn, but you were doing things to create stuff for other bodybuilders that wasn't getting treated fairly.
Yeah, and I'm not going to pat myself on the back. I mean, listen, I hear the criticisms here and there about Shawn being all about Shawn. Listen, bodybuilding is all about you. I wasn't doing this for the fans. I wasn't doing this for my family. I wasn't doing this for someone that wanted to be like Shawn. I was doing this for me. And the fruit of my labor came back to me in so many different avenues because I was available. I mean, I filled in photo shoots for some of the best bodybuilders in the world. I mean, Dorian lived in England, and Lee Haney lived in Georgia, and even Vince Taylor was living in Florida. Paul Dillette was a Canadian transplant. I lived in California, and on a moment's notice, I'd get in my car and drive an hour and a half to meet Joe Weider for lunch. The photographer would call me the night before to tell me that Chris Cormier can't make the photo shoot. Flex Wheeler can't make the photo shoot. Paul Dillette. If you knew the people I filled in for and their photo shoots, you would be amazed at how many of them had something other to do. And my answer was always yes. I was the go-to guy to fill in. So that was multiplied over the years. I mean, I competed in 3 different decades, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. I filled in for guys on a basis that, there's so many pictures. I was the most photographed guy on Flex Magazine by the time I had retired, and that was strictly because I made myself available for these photo shoots. That was important to my career, and it also sent a message to the fans, because even though Dorian Yates and Lee Haney and Ronnie Coleman were winning the title, to most fans, that was impossible to look like. I had a physique that was maybe more attainable, even maybe more desirable or more marketable to a certain degree, because when I look at the exposure of Lee Haney Ronnie Coleman and Dorian Yates, they're not even close in terms of this exposure. I don't want to say marketing, because they're all marketable to a very small percentage of people that like that look. I mean, listen, you go to the zoo, you know, to see the lions, right? The lions and the tigers. Yeah, and you want to see the elephants too. But at the end of the day, and those are the most revered and feared animals that are in the jungle. But at the end of the day, people have a way of gravitating to something that's classic, something that's timeless. And I had that look, and I patterned it behind guys like Muhammad McAway and Frank Zane and Samir Banu, who even to this day, if you put a picture up online, you find more people have a finer appreciation for that because it's more artistic. And that was always in my head. But I was not, I don't want to sit here and make it sound like I was an originator. I did create the 202-pound division when I retired because it was going extinct. I was retired. I'm watching these smaller bodybuilders get waxed. There was nowhere for them to go, and they were going to be extinct. And in 2007, I promoted the very first 202-pound contest. I didn't want to call it the Shawn Ray Classic. I didn't want to make it about Shawn Ray. I combined it with the New York Pro with the help of Steve Weinberger. And I had to pay him a certain amount of money and to do it because, you know, I didn't have to get the venue. I didn't have to get the judges. They already were there. But I had to come up with the prize money for all the athletes. David Henry won that in 2007. And then he ultimately became the very first Mr. Olympia 202 Showdown champion. They didn't want to call it the Olympia. They had to call him the Olympia Showdown. So he won the 202, the very first one in 2007 at the Olympia. That was a byproduct of what I was able to help institute in New York in 2007. And thereafter, we saw some of the bodybuilders just couldn't get down to the weight, so they raised it to 212 pounds. So I don't need a pat on the back for that. But yeah, without me pushing that and fighting for that, along with Bob Ciccarello and Jim Mannion, that division would have never happened. And we wouldn't see people like James Flex Lewis benefiting from the hard work that I did in retirement, and Jose Raymond and Sammy Al Haddad, the blacksmith. I mean, these are names. Ashkanani. These are names that we wouldn't even be talking about had I not returned and put my focus on promoting this division that ultimately I felt was saving bodybuilding, because it is a huge segment of bodybuilding that absent, we wouldn't have these superstars that are under 212 pounds.